Morning, GracePointe. I'm Em. This is Trav. That's Daisy. We're the Tinglies. Let's stand. You're the soul who understands the scars that made me who I am. Through the drifting sands of time, I got your back and you got mine. If you bear a heavy load, I'll be your wheels, I'll be the road. I'll see us through the thick and thin, for love and loss until the end. 'Cause you carried me with you, from the highest of the peaks to the darkness of the blue. I was just too blind to see. Like a lighthouse in a storm, you were always guiding me. Yeah, it's true. You carried me with you. From the day it all began, yeah, you were there, you took my hand. And when I hurt a bit too deep, you watched me as I fell asleep. And when my head was in the clouds, you found a way to pull me out. You picked my heart up off the ground and showed me love was all around. 'Cause you carried me with you, from the highest of the peaks to the darkness of the blue. I was just too blind to see. Like a lighthouse in a storm, you were always guiding me. Yeah, it's true. You carried me with you. Or we'll be sitting on the world together, watching as the days turn into nights. And we know how to brave the stormy weather, and we're never giving up without a fight. If you should ever bear a heavy load, I'll be your wheels, I'll be the road. I'll see us through the thick and thin, for love and loss until the end. 'Cause you carried me with you, from the highest of the peaks to the darkness of the blue. I was just too blind to see. Like a lighthouse in a storm, you were always guiding me. Yeah, it's true. You carried me with you. Oh, you carried me with you.
All right, if you guys would take a look around, see somebody you haven't seen in a while, and say hello to them as you hang out for a minute during the meet and greet section.
Good morning, GracePointe. And good morning to our online community. We're so glad that you're here. My name is Craig. My pronouns are he and him. And I'm glad that you're here with us today. So I have a couple of announcements. First of all, the QR code on the screen is your key to everything, including all the information I'm about to share with you, although I guarantee you on the website it will be more accurate than what I'm about to share, I'm sure. So first of all, we have a couple of activities going on in the next couple of weeks, which are with our various groups. The first is our young adult meetup, which is the 20s and 30-somethings. You're going to have a lunch after church today with Christian. I don't see Christian yet, but hopefully he'll be here and we'll talk to Christian about where that will be held. Common Ground is sort of for our members in sort of the next phase of life. So, kids running around, the, career crises, etc. So the 30s and 40s-ish having their next brunch next Sunday on October 13th. It's going to be at the Market House at the Nashville Farmers Market. And then for the Salt and Pepper group, the little more advanced stages of life, woohoo! Salt and Pepper group will be having, this is outdated, the September 17th. I know we're having our picnic on the 26th, and also follow the QR code for more information about that group. And then finally, Josh will be starting book study on the 13th at 9 a.m. So that will meet right here at GracePointe prior to church on Sundays. And it's going to be on Marcus Borg's The Heart of Christianity, Rediscovering a Life of Faith. And then finally, in 2 Sundays, so on the 20th, we'll be receiving recommendations from the congregation for our leadership council. So our requirements are that, first of all, if you would like to recommend someone for the Leadership Council, please get their permission first. And then also, please know that we would like them to have been an active member of GracePointe for at least a year. And there's Christian. Look for Christian for the young adult meetup lunch after church. Thank you. Sorry to call you out, Christian. And so from that, based on the recommendations to the Leadership Council, the LC itself will interview candidates and then actually make nominations for everyone to vote on, and that will be in the next couple of weeks. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to stand again and sing True Colors. It's kind of a rewrite of Come Thou Fount, written by one of our friends, Alana Sabatini. You can find the song actually on Spotify. I turn it on all the time in my car and just try and heal my religious trauma. So let's sing. I was lost in utter darkness. I was trapped in toxic shame. I was bound by my religion till I chose to break away. Now I'm finding my true colors. For the first time I feel free. Now I'm learning self-compassion. As I heal, I'm finding peace. I kept others at a distance, those who lived life differently. In right or wrong, but they're all humans just like me. I stepped out and love expanded us, and then melted away. Beauty found in every difference. As I listen, I'm amazed. I saw danger in my questions. I took captive all my thoughts. Certainty was my salvation till I questioned what was taught. Now my eyes are wide in wonder, mind set free now to discern. I might not have needed to learn. Let's hear your voices. I was lost in utter darkness. I was trapped in toxic shame. I was bound by my religion till I chose to break away. Now I'm finding my true colors. For the first time I feel free. And I'm learning self-compassion. As I heal, I'm finding peace. Y'all sound good. All right, we're gonna sing a song by Maddie Zom. Does anybody know who that is? Maddie Zom. Some do. Okay. She is a queer artist, Christian artist, and she's got some really amazing songs. So I encourage you to go look her up. Some of her lyrics have just been life-changing for me. And the first time I sang this song at GracePointe, I barely got through it because I bawled my eyes out. I'm not gonna do that today. But I just wanted to tell you that the first time I sang this song, there's a part in the song that talks about disappointing my mom. Oh, not gonna do it. Not gonna cry. And that's why I struggled through the song, because I thought about that relationship and the difference in theology, and some of you know what I'm talking about. This week, this day that I'm singing this song, I have my daughter singing with me, and it's so cool because I feel like we're breaking the cycle. But I'm not gonna cry. Don't make me cry. Okay. Can I get words? Be pretty and don't make it look like you're trying. Told to be Esther when I felt like Goliath. When they were wrong, I could never keep quiet. I searched for the truth and had faith that I'd find it. Set myself on fire. I let myself be the liar. All the Sundays I worried I'd disappoint my mom, 'cause I never understood some types of love being wrong. Something inside me was always steer left. What father picks a few just to leave the rest? I heard a voice inside my head disagree. So if it wasn't God, well thank God it was me. Thank God it was me. Called me a sinner when I was a saint, hiding in her bedroom, praying depression away, killing herself for eternal life, and losing her interest to be a good wife. Set myself on fire. I let them call me the liar. All the Sundays I worried I'd disappoint my mom, 'cause I never understood a type of love being wrong. But something inside me was always steer left. No father picks a few just to leave the rest. I heard a voice inside my head, it disagreed. So if that wasn't God, if that choose. I'm not wasting my life, 'cause the voice in my head has always been right. All the Sundays I worried I'd disappoint my mom, 'cause I never understood a type of love being wrong. But something inside me was always steering left. No father picks a few just to leave the rest.
You may be seated. Good morning, GracePointe.
Good morning.
How's everybody doing?
Good.
It is so good to see you here today. We are really fortunate today because our founding pastor, Stan Mitchell, is here, and I'm going to invite Stan to come up and give you an update on the work he's doing as he represents GracePointe out in the larger world.
Yes, good to see everybody. Great to be home every now and then. Josh asked me just to say a few words. A lot of you know what I do, but I always want to root it in this place. What I do is just an extension of what happens here. Through the week, I do 8 to 12 intensives with families, generally Southern Baptist, Assembly of God, Church of Christ. Anybody know those worlds? About a third of the work that I do now is with LDS families, Mormon families. So conservative Catholics, conservative Protestants, conservative LDS folk, just wrestling at the intersection. The way these people come to me, too, came last night. I don't even know how I stumbled into it. It's an embarrassment to my daughter that the exclusive work I do is on Facebook, not some of the newer mediums, but there's a reason for that, because the target audience for me is really 45 to 70-year-old parents of these queer kids, and they reach out under the cover of night, generally, gosh, I don't know, 25 or 30, maybe 35 a month, 2 to 3 a day, sometimes there's 10. But you'll notice sometime, if you follow me on Facebook, y'all are way too cool to do that, but if you were on Facebook, you would see that sometime I post more than others, and that's just to regulate the people that come in, because when somebody reaches out to me time after time, they're incredibly desperate, and so I don't want to leave them hanging. My goal is to always get back to them within 24 hours, and I just send them my phone number and say, call me. And I start a pastoral relationship with them if that's what they want, and I tell them about this church, and I travel. Last year, I flew 191 flights and drove 73,000 miles. And it's just going to these people where they are and meeting with them in these intensives that cover an entire day and night, and it's every permutation of the family. It's the kid themselves, it's the kid with the parents, the kid with the grandparents, the kid with their siblings, all of them together, the kid with one sister, and we just do it all day long and all night. And it's just the loveliest thing in the world. Hard part of what I do, again, as an extension of this place, I've done 26 funerals, and I just did one last week that's hard in my head, but I've done 26 funerals in the last 41 months. Wasn't last week, it was a couple of weeks ago, a 17 and 15-year-old brother and sister. But anyway, it's just religious trauma, and you guys know, and it's, if I could carry this church with me to the little towns in North Dakota and Delaware and Arkansas where I meet these folk, I would, but I tell them about you and try to convince them that it's real, and they watch online. And then on the weekends, probably 45 to 47 weeks, I'm at churches, either churches that have done inclusion or like the United Methodist Church in Arkansas last week that had not done inclusion, but the pastor had kind of intimated that they had, and I did my sermon accordingly and then spent a long time after service in the foyer. So she set me up, and it was a good thing. She's retiring soon, so that's so it was quite an experience, but that's what I do, and I just love the fact that it's rooted in this church, and it really is. Everything that we've done here for the last 20 years, 21 years now, I just try to take with me everywhere I go. And the third thing I do is I stay deeply involved here. I said 5 years ago when I moved to Pastor Emeritus, I would serve this church every way I could. It feels, just it's a part of my life. We started the church in my living room 21 years ago, but I said that the appropriate way to do that is at the behest of the new lead pastor. And fortunately, Josh has honored me, keeps me deeply involved. We talk 2 to 3 times a week, and to feel honored by the new pastor as a pastor emeritus is a lovely thing. And to be able to come here and just be comfortable is one of the real gifts of my life. So that's my life, and y'all are a big part of it, whether you knew it or not. So you can find me on the World Wide Web at Facebook, or I don't know.
Thank you, Stan, so much. We appreciate you representing us out in the larger world. I am really excited to introduce to you a couple of friends who are that's probably why some of you are here, because of these couple of friends. And so let me first begin with Brit Barron. Brit Barron is a speaker, author, and pastor. Brit engages audiences with narratives that inspire, educate, and entertain. As an experienced storyteller, Brit has become known for her ability to use personal narratives and experiences from her own life to highlight larger universal truths. Brit is a published author, and her newest book, Do You Still Talk to Grandma?, which may be the greatest title of a book in the world, invites readers to imagine the world beyond cancel culture and is on a mission to help us all navigate the relationships with people we love and disagree with at the same time. Will you join me in welcoming Brit Barron? And next, April Ajoy is an author, content creator, and podcast host who uses humor to shine light on harmful, toxic, and sometimes just weird traits of American evangelicalism. It's a little weird. After growing up an evangelist kid entrenched in Christian nationalism and working in conservative Christian media, she saw the harm caused firsthand. Still a Christian, she uses her platform to expose the dangers of Christian nationalism while promoting a more inclusive faith. April has been featured on BuzzFeed, CNN, Newsweek, and more. She's been married to Beecher for 10 years, and they have 2 daughters together. Would you join me in welcoming April? So exciting. So glad you all are here. So I've known April for a few years now. Yeah. I just had the joy of meeting Brit at the Wild Goose Festival, and we ended up riding around, carpooling together all week, and it was just incredible. I thought we could start with each of you just giving us sort of a 36,000-foot view of the books that you wrote that just came out. You share a book birthday.
We do.
They both came out Tuesday this last week. You have a chance to buy a copy at the end of the day. Brit, could you just give us, what is Do You Still Talk to Grandma about?
Yeah, so, no, I know this one. The subtitle is When the Problematic People in Our Lives Are the Ones We Love. And this is a project I started working on in 2021 when I looked around and I started asking a question of what could potentially be on the other side of cancel culture. How can we, with our own integrity, stay in relationships with people we disagree with? And is it possible to hold deep love and deep disappointment at the same time? And I know a lot of us are in that. And what's really funny is when I got the pub date for the book, I was like, by 2024, we're not going to be talking about this. But here we are. So that's the book.
Awesome. And I mean, I think we don't have to do a show of hands, but I would guess, unless you are just the most fortunate person on the planet, in the last decade, you probably have experienced that difficult relationship that has emerged as our culture and our politics have taken a really strange and kind of awful turn. And when I found out that both of them were going to be in town on the same day, and I knew that April has a book about Star-Spangled Jesus, which is about Christian nationalism, I knew that this could be a fruitful conversation. So could you just give us, obviously it's about Christian nationalism, but I know you, and so I know that there's all sorts of great stuff in there.
Yeah, so it's about Christian nationalism, but it's a lot of it, it's part memoir. It tells a lot of personal stories of my time in it, if you don't know anything about me. My dad was an evangelist growing up. We were very Christian nationalists. We believe America was a Christian nation and that God had blessed America pretty much in entire history. And the reason why bad things happened, like 9/11, was because of gays and abortionists. And the only way to get a country back on track was to get rid of those people or to mandate legislation to make them stop. That's rooted in that ideology in Christian nationalism. today too. But my Christian nationalist highlights include me singing an original song called America Say Jesus on the Jim Bakker Show. So I think that says it all. But there's lots of little stories about that in the book. And I do it kind of from a humorous perspective because, yes, Christian nationalism is really dangerous, and I definitely treat it seriously, but it's also weird. I think Tim Walz kind of identified that perfectly when he called a lot of that movement weird. And there's just some funny, weird things that have happened in my life. And so, why not laugh about it? Because we could all just cry, but I'd rather laugh. So.
I'm really grateful that most of my sermons that would fall in that category are on cassette somewhere that nobody will ever listen to again, so I can somewhat deny them. So April, let me ask you this. You grew up steeped in that, and I think often about Richard Rohr's quote where he says, you can't see what you were taught not to look for. So what is it for you that began to sort of crack that shell on the Christian nationalist upbringing you had?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest problems with stopping Christian nationalism today is that it is so intertwined with American evangelicalism that you can't see the nationalism in your faith. And so they were so intertwined that I kind of started deconstructing my more Pentecostal beliefs when my dad died of cancer in 2011 because we believed he was going to be healed and then he wasn't. And once that kind of crumbled, it left me more vulnerable to question other things. And so there were a lot of little steps along the way. Like one of my brothers came out as gay, and I grew up in a family. I remember when I was 8, we were in a restaurant. Our waiter acted more feminine than I had seen a man act, and my dad was like, we need to leave. And I asked why, and he said, that man's a homosexual. And I had this, I remember, it's like one of those vivid memories. I remember looking back at the man as he watched us leave, and he looked so hurt. And I had not learned to hate him yet. And in that moment, it felt wrong, but I believed my dad, And so, but those little things stick with you, even if you're not old enough to figure it out. And then obviously the next big thing was Trump happening. I don't know if I need to expound on that or not.
We're all trying to forget. I think there was something so significant about that 2015, almost a decade ago, that really shook a lot of people awake. And April, you mentioned, believing your dad. And so coming to you, Brit, who wrote a book about what we do with people who are different and the difficult people in our lives. Have you had a similar experience? Was that, in the people you've talked to and the people in your community, that the last decade has been a real sort of wake-up call for a lot of people that you've talked to?
Yeah, I think it's been a wake-up call, and I think it's felt like people were more on the edges than we've ever been, right? So it's different than a Romney-Obama situation politically, and there's a ton more identity points, but I think access to social media, our access to information, our interactions with people online, all of these things have pushed towards a different kind of dialogue that does feel urgent in a way that I think is sometimes helpful, sometimes very not helpful.
Yeah. So what compelled you to say, I need to address this specifically, this idea of cancel culture and what is on the other side? Were there specific moments that you just said somebody should talk about this?
Yeah. I mean, it was a ton of moments coming through 2020 and seeing a lot of things that felt good, and at the same time, I think something that is just true to me is that when I talk about or want liberation for all people, I really want it for all people. And I think the stories of Jesus are a constant reminder to me that that is a story for everyone. And I think expanding my understanding of that to include folks who are on the other side really started to push me to ask, okay, is that the work that I'm actually doing, though? Is that something that's happening? And as much as I think the work expanded there, it started internally. You joke, right, about Christian nationalism, you joke about your cassette tapes that can't be on. And I think sometimes our own rejection of even things that we used to believe and our lack of empathy for those versions of ourselves directly translates into the experiences we have with other people. So if we can't hold that nuance for ourselves, we'll never be able to hold it for someone else. And I think the further we get away from those versions of ourselves, the more we feel like we can be over here, and we've always been over here, and it gets a little bit more elevated and a little bit more distant, and then we get farther and farther on these poles when I'm like, oh, I can look at conservative evangelicals and be like, you're dumb and you're lame and you're antiquated and you're prehistoric dinosaurs, like incapable of change. And I'm like, are you, or are you me 15 years ago? You know? And if you're me 15 years ago, then what do I actually want? Like, do I want to just be on a high horse island by myself, or do I actually want transformation and liberation for all people who I believe are in an oppressive system of Christian white nationalism?
Yeah, yeah, you can clap for that. That was absolutely incredible. Yeah. We're not Pentecostal, but we do that, and that's totally fine for you.
Come on down to the altar.
So, April, thinking about this, I could go through a list of people that I was friends with for more than a decade, that I'd done ministry with, that our kids grew up together. I mean, it was like we were thick as thieves, ride or die. This is not going anywhere. Who now we're not in each other's lives, and there's no sense of communication. There's just pain and weirdness. And I'm guessing your journey out of Christian nationalism into a more expansive view of God and humanity, you probably have some stories like that for yourself.
Yes. I have family members that have blocked me. But yeah, it's been a wild place, because I have a lot of people in my life that either say this about me behind my back or to me, like, oh my gosh, you've changed so much. But I used to kind of take offense to that, because I'm like, yeah, I guess I have changed. But look at the world and everything that's happened in the world, and to me it's weirder that they haven't changed. Like, how are you going through life and experiencing all these things and meeting new people, and you're still the same? And I think of that scripture that says, like, to be have our minds renewed. Like, I feel like it's holy to be in a place where you can change your mind and to be open and to be willing about that. And to Brit's point that she was just making, like, when I was writing this book, I think it's really easy being on this side now to not have that grace for ourselves, and then having a hard time having grace for people that are still Christian nationalists, and because they are actively causing harm. And it's hard, it's hard to look past that. But as I was writing the book and I was putting myself, like, back into my mindset when I was Christian nationalist, I meant well. And I thought I was doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And I don't think this is for everybody that's in that movement, but I think for the most part, people that get caught up in that, they think they're doing the right thing. And so we got to find a way to approach it where do we agree? If it's abortion, which is a huge one, it's like, you know what? I want to lower abortion rates too.
Right.
Let's talk about how we do that. Like, what's the best way to actually do that, instead of, they like to say baby murderer, but, I personally have never murdered a baby, just clarifying. But yeah.
Yeah. And, so I think, and I see this, it's easy to just say folks on the side that's opposite of ours, well, they don't have a lot of kindness or compassion toward us. But I also see some folks who would share our lenses for things, who go on social media and are just as hateful and just as dismissive and dehumanizing. And so you made a post on Instagram yesterday that was just, it's okay to change your mind. And you talked about this idea of being able to have compassion for ourselves so that we can extend it to other people. Can you talk, because I think one of the problems people have is when we talk about this, like, if I'm going to extend compassion to somebody who's Christian nationalist or somebody who's doing sorts of things that I think are harming the world and people I love and care about, the tension, I think, is between having compassion for them, but also there being some sense of accountability. And I know you talk about that, so could you kind of speak to that issue, the accountability issue?
Yeah. So I think one thing that has become connected that I don't believe is connected, but I think a lot of us fear that if we are able to access empathy for someone, then that's the same as condoning their behavior. And it's not the same. I think being able to access empathy and understand where someone is coming from isn't the same as co-signing on their behavior. And something I say all the time is the work never changes. The work is liberation. The work is dismantling corrupt systems. The work is transformation. Our approach to the work changes when we are able to access that empathy. And I think it starts to look different. And so I think my ability to look at someone who's sitting in a seat I once sat in and say, like, oh my gosh, like, I know that this makes you feel so safe. I understand that your entire community is wrapped up in here. That doesn't mean I'm saying like, yeah, so actually keep going, doing what you're doing, right? But now my approach to like getting those people out of those oppressive systems is going to change, right? Just even watching Stan up here just a few minutes ago, like I could see the empathy and compassion like on his face for these folks he's working with, and that is fundamentally going to change the way he does that work. It doesn't change the work itself. And I think something I talk about in the book, there's a chapter called Accountability versus Annihilation. And I think a lot about that with cancel culture. What started as accountability then turned to annihilation. And in other words, it's what's the difference between consequences and punishments, right? Consequences are just a fact of life, right? And consequences are results of our actions. And punishments are usually shame-based, right? Like, if you're a parent and you're like, hey, my kid threw a tantrum in Target, and then so I went and threw a tantrum in their class. And I was like, hey, you embarrassed me, so I'm going to embarrass you, right? We'd be like, I don't know if that's an appropriate thing. And that's so much of the dialogue I see online, right? I see comments, and I see posts, and I see all these things, and they can say, no matter what they say, what I hear is, I'm hurting, and I want you to hurt too. I feel shame, and I want you to feel shame too. And I don't know how far that's going to get us. And I think our fear is that if we can begin to embody compassion, empathy, and understanding for these folks, then that is us agreeing with them. But I think that accessing empathy and understanding is not less radical. It's actually maybe the most radical thing we could do.
And since one of the theologies that I desperately wanted to leave behind was this idea that God is a retributive God, that God, like the best God can come up with for how to fix the problems of the world is just to punish people for them. But then you end up seeing that it can creep into the way we actually, there's what you believe at a intellectual level, and then there's how you show up in the world. And often how we can, and I can see this tendency myself to just want to, sometimes my sarcastic humor is faster than my brain's ability to, and the number of times I will respond to someone with a tweet and 2 seconds later delete the tweet and be like, that's not who you want to be today. But also wanting someone to know because it was really funny. Yeah. Like, so I've got to call somebody and say, this is not me at my best moment, but listen to this sick burn. So April, I know you engage a lot online. You engage lots of folks from this perspective. Have you found moments where you feel like you've had generative conversations with people, or is it generally, you just have to end up saying, this is not I can't lead you on this journey?
I found it really hard to have meaningful conversation in a comment section. Even people that come in with a question that seem like they're in good faith, most of the time they're not, that I've found. I have had meaningful conversations where people have like privately messaged me that maybe came from a different perspective, but genuinely were like, I just want to learn more. And I think they were probably privately messaging me because they didn't want anyone in their world to know that they were talking to me.
Right. Nicodemus-esque.
Right. Yeah. They didn't want the Jezebel spirit like hopping over. But yeah, no, it really just depends on the person. And I feel like you can kind of tell in how someone asks a question, whether it's a good faith question or not. But a lot of times I'll reply to comments with videos and make a joke about it. It's like not necessarily addressing them, but it's just kind of making fun of whatever idea they're commenting about that's like an oppressive theology. Like recently, not to name drop, but Mark Driscoll made a video about my spouse and I.
Wow.
I don't know.
You've finally done it.
I know. If you don't know who Mark Driscoll is, he was so abusive that his conservative church kicked him out.
What we would say here is if you don't know who he is, you're blessed and highly favored.
Yes, just go to sleep. Yeah, just go to sleep well Google tonight. Yeah, but he's got a decent platform. So he made a video, because Beecher, my spouse is non-binary, if you don't know. Beecher's right there. And they spoke at a church over the summer for Pride Month, and I just made a video talking about like, oh my gosh, look at our journey, da-da-da. So Mark Driscoll made a video. It was a stupid response, but he called us demonic and, the usual shtick, right? But he's very much man and woman marriage. The wife submits and obeys the husband. And so we just made like a funny little sketch of like how kind of ridiculous that whole thing is anyway. And so we're like in the video, and Beatrice's like, okay, fine, I'm the man and you have to obey me. And as the man, I say I'm non-binary. And then they switched back to being non-binary. And I was like, but wait, but if you're non-binary, then you're not the man. So do I still submit to you even though you're the man and you just said that you're non-binary? And it was just like this vicious cycle. So that's kind of the approach I like to take, is just poking fun at it, because I also think humor disarms people a little bit more when they can laugh about something that... It does get me in trouble, though, because sometimes I'll have videos that go beyond the people that follow me, and so then conservative evangelicals will start following me because they think this church humor is funny, and then I make a pro-queer post, and they're like, unfollowing! I'm like, okay. But yeah, I mean, I think as far as the people, though, we've had family members that we've had meaningful conversations with, and honestly, just showing up, even if we don't talk about Beecher's gender identity or our politics, in their mind, they think anyone queer has a demon, like that's still a very mainstream belief. And then us just showing up to Thanksgiving and being normal and just kind, like we joke about it, but it's like our new mission field. Like we're just planting seeds. Like, look, we're just human too. I think that just goes a long way too. Just having regular interactions that aren't so hostile, to just kind of, oh yeah, like you're a human being just like I am.
And I know, and I think I would say, everybody's journey may not be that, in the sense of it may be that going home for Thanksgiving is dangerous for you, for your mental health, for your well-being. But I just wonder, Brit, I mean, in your experience and with the work you've done, how important is it for people to make that first move to say, as long as I'm safe, as long as I'm not putting myself in a situation, that I'm going to keep being the one to show up and try to see the other as a human being, and understand that I think everybody ended up where they've ended up at for reasons. I don't think anybody wakes up and says, I'm going to go pick the wrong side of a thing today and cheer for it and give it my life. So what has that been in your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed it. Something I say a lot is it's not fair, but it's probably true. You're going to have to be the bigger person. Because at the end of the day, I think it's only people who have experienced liberation that are available to offer it. And so to imagine a world where... thank you. Wow, yeah, write that one. Mark that for the next one, opening line. But I do think that, I think there is a lot of conversation about what's fair and what's unfair, and I think there is a lot of unfairness and a lot of, put on the queer community, on communities of color, on all kind of communities. And at the same time, I truly believe you can't give what you don't have. And so if you have experienced liberation, then you are the only one who is equipped to bring it. And I think that means a lot for how we look at our relationships going forward. And just like you said, if you're unsafe, get out. But if you are in a place where you are able to feel that and to say that and to be like, okay, I've experienced this. And something you said is no one wakes up and they kind of think like, I want to land on the wrong side of an issue. Something I really believe is very rarely are we arguing with someone about facts. Almost none of us are a collection of facts. We're a collection of feelings. And so when we are arguing with someone or we are talking to someone, very rarely are we arguing facts with them. We are arguing against their sense of belonging to whatever it is, right? Their church community, their ideology. When I think about myself, even sitting in there and being like, okay, sitting in those churches, probably long after I believed what they were still saying, the only reason I was still there was that was my community. That was the way I understood the world, right? When we are coming up against someone's sense of belonging, there's a different kind of way we can understand the communication. We've all been in an experience where we're like, hey, I'm going to tell you a fact. And then we expect that, it's going to change our mind. Like, did you know 64% of, blank is blank? And they're like, no, fake news. Yeah, you know what I mean? But to sort of realize that that's what we're talking about. That's what we're arguing against, and that's where people are meeting us. Is they're like, this is the way I've understood the world, and I've had to make meaning of it. Coming against that it's a different kind of conversation, and it's tough, and it's really hard, and it's really sad. And I was just talking to a friend to say, he's like, I'm like, I wish I could say another message. You know what I mean? I wish, but I think in looking at the transformational work and stories of Jesus, there is a responsibility to offer that liberation in any way we can.
You know, when you were describing, you were talking about Stan, you could see it on his face. There's a line in Scripture I always come back to, which is when Jesus was talking to the rich ruler, and, you know, they're going through the whole negotiation process, and the guy just doesn't get it, and it says Jesus looked at him and loved him. Mm-hmm. And part of that love was being willing to let him go the way he was going to go. But starting from that place of, I think one of the things that felt so schmarmy about evangelicalism for me was everybody, we talked about evangelism here last week and that old paradigm and what it might mean in a different paradigm. But this idea that everybody was just a potential number, a potential convert, and so you make friends with somebody just to get them to believe your religion. And that feels, we know, if you grew up in that, you know what that feels like, to be seen as just a potential number on a baptism list or whatever. And I think, how important is it when we're looking at people who, I want to change every Christian nationalist's mind. I do. But how different is it to begin with, I'm going to change your mind, or I actually care about you as a human being, because human flourishing is the gospel. And if you're not flourishing, then you're not living your fullest life. And so that's a different motivation, don't you think, than I just want to change you?
Yeah, and I think we know this from relationships, not with people we disagree with, just any relationship. If you walk into a conversation and your expectation is, we're going to walk away thinking what I think, then you've set yourself up, right? That's marital conversations, that's like parenting, that's any conversation. It's a hard way to walk in. And I think, to your point, I think we have to do a lot better job of balancing how we interact on the internet and how we interact in real life. Because it kind of has created these, like, sometimes in my head, every single person that is like conservative is the most extreme version of that I've seen on the internet. And then you kind of get in a room with them and you realize, like, you remember, like, oh my gosh, you're my aunt and I've actually known you for a lot of years. And this is like, oh my gosh, you're a real person. And there's nuance and there's depth here. And so our ability to, like, hold two things as true at the same time is incredibly difficult but incredibly important. Like, oh, I love this person. I think this thing you think is crazy. Here we go, you know?
Yeah. Well, I actually was just telling my wife, Carla, the other day, I ended up at a sports bar during an Atlanta Braves game. That's my team. I don't want to talk about it right now. And I ended up sitting with a chair in between me and these two other guys. One guy was a Vietnam vet. The other, I mean, they're probably a little bit older than me. They're in their 50s, maybe early 60s. And we ended up having an hour-long conversation that was deep and fun and about baseball. It was deep about baseball. We were equally conservative about baseball. But we ended up having this great conversation, and if the conversation's over, they go their way and I go mine. And I thought, I bet if they knew what I think about X, Y, and Z, they wouldn't have talked to me. And then it hit me. I bet if I knew if my hunches about them were true, I would have totally not engaged them. And instead, we had their opinion of me and my opinion of them is based on this 1 hour-long conversation. Being able to sit down and actually engage people, and sometimes being able to just bracket. And you know, you can only bracket so long, right? These things are dangerous and need to be dealt with. But I don't think they're going to be dealt with if we don't see people as people. Yeah. So how about this? Or is there anything we haven't touched on that you really want to touch on? Because if not, I'd love to open it up and let our folks here ask questions if they'd like to. And we have a mic over here. Would you mind, Craig, to pass that around to folks? So do you have a question about anything we've talked about, anything when it comes to loving your grandma, which is a good thing to do, anything about nationalism, we'll just open it right up.
Hi, my name is Stephen, he, him, and I'd love to hear you both share about, you talked about you can't offer liberation unless you had it, and as a neuroscientist, I work in the field of neuroplasticity, and you can't move past an emotional situation unless you have an equal or greater emotional situation. And so I'd love to hear what are some examples of way that you can, and I don't want to couch it as self-care, but healing, growth, exercises, thoughts, encounters with friends, possible self-liberating moments that you can experience so that you can then offer to that. Because I can't offer you cookies unless I've baked the cookies. It's kind of how I see it, is unless I've done the work. So I'm curious, what are examples of the work? What are examples of self-liberation that you can experience and possibly offer in small doses before you get up the courage, like coming out? I knew to not come out to my family until I was confident and I was ready to offer that regardless of how they responded. So my question is, what are some examples that you can think of or ways to help bring this home so we can grab onto those experiences as well?
I'll take a stab at it. That's an incredible question. I think a lot about my own journey. I remember so vividly coming out to my parents, and I remember them looking surprised. I'm a late in life bloomer, and I just remember this feeling where I was like, oh my gosh, I've thought about this every single day, all day for like years, and this is their first interaction with it. And so I think you're exactly right. How do we cultivate that? I think, and I don't know if this is what you meant, but I think two things that came to mind are, one, boundaries. I think when I can model to myself and people around me to keep those boundaries. I have boundaries, and I'm not just talking about relationally, boundaries with information, boundaries with news in an election year, boundaries with my phone, boundaries with social media, boundaries with ways that when I find myself pushing to the extremes. And the second thing, which I can't remember right now, but it was in my head a few minutes ago, was boundaries. And then there's a term you may be familiar with, psychologist Ari Kuglansky coined, called cognitive closure. It's the point at which our minds decided they've taken enough information on a topic and we become cognitively closed, which is helpful because we make decisions. Like if you're crossing the street, you look both ways. Eventually you're like, I have enough information. But it's dangerous, and that's how we become extreme. And so I think my practice of being cognitively closed on the what, but being open always on the how, I think is something that I is a discipline I have that keeps myself open, that I think is something I can share with the people around me. So yes, anti-racism, yes. How does that work out, and how does that live out in community? I'm always down to be like, yes, let's talk more. I'm open. Oh, I didn't think about that. Oh, maybe this wasn't the most helpful thing. I say all the time, I'm like, I look back on 2020 and some of the things I did, and I'm like, I don't know if that was, I needed to DM my chiropractor that, but that's where I was at the time.
And I want to hear, April, your thoughts, but that goes exactly to what you were talking about on Instagram yesterday, which is this idea of realizing that if you have moved from a place to a place, or you understand that, I always tell people, like, this idea that you've landed somewhere and that's where you're fully going to be and you've completely figured it all out, that's just a myth. But the idea that, if you were to go back and listen to those cassette tapes from the late 90s, early 2000s, I would say things in there that I fully disavow and know were harmful. And so for me to not have any amount of grace or compassion for a person who's currently doing that, it's a little unfair for me, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, staying close to those versions of ourselves. James Baldwin has a quote. He says, I imagine the reason people cling so tightly to hate is because they fear once the hate is gone, they'll be forced to deal with pain. And I think it is incredibly painful to think about. I think about this all the time. When I was Christian and straight passing, I would preach at, I would talk about purity culture, to people not in a good way, in a bad way, as good at the time. That was confusing. At the time, I'd be like, it's good. Now I'm like, that was bad. And it is incredibly painful to think about. I'm like, there's someone in therapy right now, some sweet woman who's just like, okay, when I was 16, I went to this church and this lady told me, and it's me, she's processing something I said that is still negatively impacting her life, is painful. What would be easier is to disconnect myself from that version of myself and be like, all those purity culture people are idiots and they're so stupid and they're bad people. And so there's just a different kind of thing that happens when we are allowed to stay close. It pushes us more towards processing that pain and more away from sort of gearing up into that hate.
Stan and I were talking the other day, and the phrase transcend and include, that even that still carries with it we'll take this part, this is part of us, it's one of the rings of the tree, but instead of expand and include, which to me it carries this idea, we're not transcending above other people, we're just expanding, we're doing the natural human thing of learning and growing and changing, and there is no way to get rid of the versions of us that came before. They're just They're just in there. They're just in there. Oh, well, April, so I think, just knowing a bit about your journey, there's been some liberation in your way of being in the world, your way of thinking, understanding. What would you say to Stephen? Oh, sorry, Stephen's question.
One thing that I say and try to constantly remind myself is to give yourself grace for the things that you did and said when you were indoctrinated. And that, like I think Maya Angelou said, when you know better, you do better. And there are people out there that can come into the same information you did and that I did, and they don't change. And even if it's a small change, it's still a change. And I don't think it's a small thing to leave an oppressive system. I think that's a huge thing. And I know I have moments where I regret that I didn't change sooner, but I try not to dwell on that because I still did change. And I need to give myself the grace for the things that I did when I also thought I was just doing the right thing. And, I look at little 16-year-old me also sitting through purity pledges, feeling so much shame for holding a boy's hand, and constantly thinking of hell and all of these things. And I don't blame her for the way she turned out. But I'm really glad that I didn't stay her also.
And I think about this. I no longer see the Bible the way I saw the Bible as a Southern Baptist at all. But I actually now, and when I went through my deconstruction at the beginning, I was really angry. I was mad at everybody in the world. It was just part of the grieving process. But I used to, now I can look back and say, I disagree with so much about the way, theologically and all that. I disagree with how they see the Bible. I'm really glad, personally, that they instilled in me a love and care for Scripture. And that I kind of know the Bible the way I do, which I wouldn't have. And so it's interesting to even be able to go through a journey and a process and get to a place where you can say, I wouldn't go back there. I don't see it the way they do it. But even in that, there were still some gifts. I don't know. Have you had that experience looking back on your...
Yeah, I think one of the number one things we could do to help ourselves in the work moving forward is to do our best to unlearn this idea of that things are binary. This all good, all bad, this black and white thinking, it's incredibly helpful to be able to hold nuance for something, including ourselves, but also including experiences we have. Like, I say this all the time, like, as a queer black woman, I hate it here. I hate America. and then I'm like, oh, as a queer black woman, I also love it here. And my job isn't to say which one of those is more important, which one outweighs the other. My job is to not reconcile all these things to, like, net positive or negative. It's just to hold these truths at the same time. Sometimes it feels more heavy. Like, I went to a Christian college where, like, all my best friends to this day still went, and I'm still paying for, and I would never step foot on, and I don't own any of their merch. Like, you know what I mean? So there's this, like, I think it's okay to say, like, and that it's, if I'm saying it wasn't completely bad or there's some redeemable things from Southern Baptists, that's not saying that, okay, I guess it's good now. It's just saying, like, oh, multiple things can be true. We don't live in this, like, black and white thing with people or experiences.
Yeah, nuance is a lost art.
Yeah.
Being able to say yes and or yeah, no, or yeah, it's a lost art. We have another question? Yes.
This baby has a question.
Amen.
I think there may be a question online.
Okay, once we get this one and then we'll take that one. Yes. Thank you, Troy.
Hi. My question is, if you have close relationships, especially chosen ones, like romantic or friendship and the like, or even with family, but where you know that they hold some of those still very harmful beliefs or have started to hold those harmful beliefs, and so it's gotten to where, like, okay, well, we just can't talk about these things, but then that list keeps stacking up, and you guys are okay as long as you don't talk about all these important things, but like, where do you move forward from there?
I think it depends on the person. Like, if the relationship is important enough and it's going to be to toxic to keep talking politics. Like, I think it's okay to not. But, you know, you can sneak in little things. Like, we have family that were very conservative. Some of them still are. That over years, just little by little, having conversations that sometimes got heated, but we kept the love for each other at the root of it. And, you know, at the end, we could say, you know, we love y'all. We know that we disagree on this. But, like, Beecher and I, we talk a lot, too. Like, we would much rather have a conversation with someone if from the front we could say, will you just hear me? Like, I will listen to what you're saying. Will you actually listen to what I'm saying? And, like, frame it as, like, let's actually have a conversation. I'm not trying to persuade you. I just want you to hear me because I don't know if my perspective is coming through. And then I want to hear your perspective. I want to understand where you're coming from. The things that I have found that have worked, and actually, even if they were little baby steps, were still baby steps, was asking them questions to try to get them to explain why they believe certain ways, whether it's politics or ideologies. There's a lot of cognitive dissonance in that ideology, and if you can hit those buttons, not in an aggressive way, but just saying, like, I really don't understand how, like, why do you believe this? Like, where are you getting this information from? And get them to explain it. Those were the things that really made me stop when people asked me questions, be like, hey, how are you pro-life, but you're also for the death penalty? And I said my talking point, but it stuck back there, you know? Because it's like, yeah, why am I? That doesn't seem to make sense. And little by little, just asking them questions, getting them to do it and not being aggressive. That is the thing that I've seen make the most change.
Yeah, that makes me think of something my dad always said, like, the three most powerful words in the English language are help me understand. When you're really wanting to do that. And I think when it comes down to personal relationships, I spent a lot of my career in the DEI space doing, like, corporate anti-racism trainings. Who's jealous? You know, something that was funny is at the end, there would almost always be someone and they'd be like, hey, so my Uncle John said this at Thanksgiving. What should I say? And I'm like, I don't know. That's your Uncle John. And there's I think something that's beautiful about pushing, like, ourselves and understanding our own journeys and our own stories is trusting ourselves that we know what to do. You know, I think so much of Christianity is pushing ourselves towards an external authority, like whatever the pastor says or whatever this person says, or you know what I mean. And I joke that all my friends who have deconstructed and left church, they just left only for Brene Brown to be their pastor now. I'm like, you guys, you've got it. The goal is your own voice, you know? And so, yeah, I would say the other thing, too, is, like, when you're sensing those relationships and it feels like, okay, the list is growing of things we can't talk about, but this is someone who I'm like, but I'm in it with them. Like, we're going to circle back, you know, after the election, or we're going to, like, I'm going to let this subside, or this is important enough, or I need some space, you know? And just being able to trust ourselves to know when we can kind of do those things.
Yeah, so good. Troy, did we have a question from online?
We do. Yeah. So the question's from Ash in our online community, and they ask, we know that power has lied with white supremacy. How do we balance that in these interactions? How do we acknowledge that while not triggering that defensiveness or sounding like we are shaming?
Well, I mean, white supremacy is an oppressive structure, and it's designed so that the people who are oppressed under it don't know that, right? Like, white supremacy is not only oppressive to folks of color, it's oppressive to white people who are trapped in that as well. And so, I mean, I'll tell the story without... I was talking to someone, and I was doing my best to help me understand work. And this person presented in a way where every single one of their identities was like the winners, you know? You know what I mean? Big winner. And he was telling me, he was like, I feel like I am now being oppressed. And I feel like as a straight white man, I'm being left behind. And I feel like straight white man is becoming a slur. And he was saying all these things, and in my mind I was like, no, that's not true. But he really did feel that. And he felt that. And there was a part of me where at some point where I was like, oh, okay, so this is how you're actually feeling. And that is going to change the way I have a conversation with you. I'm not going to hand you a copy of the 1619 Project and be like, go for it. You know what I mean? Why don't you learn something, dummy? But really getting to having a conversation now where I'm like me trying to understand that took his defenses down, and then we were actually able to have a really good conversation about what that felt like. And could he imagine how that has other people have felt like that? And could he imagine a world where it was imbalanced and it became balanced, and then he would be feeling that? And it ended up being a great conversation, but I did do the help me understand to see like, oh, you're feeling this, right? Like, again, we're not arguing facts. Like, I can draw you from like 1492 to like now how white supremacy has like made its way into the thing. But we're gonna have a conversation that this is like, you're scared that something's gonna happen. Whether or not I think that is like my worldview, I'm like talking to a human who's feeling that, you know?
And in some ways, it doesn't matter as much, like it matters, but even if it's not reality, it's their reality.
Yeah, feelings are never right or wrong, they just are. You can't tell someone, like, you can't be mad, you know? And they're like, I am.
The best thing to tell someone when they're panicked is calm down.
Yeah.
It always works.
Oh, that's actually not something you should worry about. Yeah, so we're good, you know? But I think there's so much in just saying, like, okay, like, and we were able to actually, like, to your point, like, I was able to hear them, and they were able to hear me, and I feel like we actually got somewhere versus like a, you know, coming out and I'm like, here are all the reasons white supremacy is like in your mind, you know, versus being like, okay, can you imagine that feeling, and can you imagine that I felt that as well, and then can you imagine, like, you know what I mean, like these, that different kind of conversation. And by the way, like, we all know people. Some people are willing to have these conversations, and some people aren't, and you got to use some discernment there as well.
It's almost like empathy is the thing that sort of cracks it all open. And getting people to understand other people's perspective. So we unfortunately, we're out of time. We are going to have one more song in just a second. I just wanted to say, Brit, April, thank you all for being here. Thank you for the good work you're doing in the world. My gosh, we're so grateful for you. Yeah, let's pray. God, we are grateful for Brit and April, for who they are, for the work they're doing in the world, and for the important ideas, thoughts, and questions that have been raised through their work in this discussion. Our hope is that we will continue to grow and expand, that we will engage empathy and compassion far more than we engage hate and bitterness. Shape us into the kinds of people who are consistently learning, growing, and being transformed. And as Jesus taught, help us to see that our call is to love our neighbor and our enemy. But our call is to show up in the world in a way that brings compassion and justice. And so we offer ourselves to that good work. And we ask this in gratitude in Jesus' name. And everybody said, Amen. Thank you all so much for being here with us today, GracePointe. Brit and April are going to be right over there. You can buy books and get them signed. Have a great week.
Sometimes in our lives, we all have pain, we all have sorrow, but if we are wise, we know that there's always tomorrow. Lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on, for it won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. Please swallow 'cause we all need somebody to lean on. I just might have a problem that you'll understand. We all need somebody to lean on me. When you're not strong, and I'll be your friend, yeah, and I'll help you carry on. For it won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. You just call on me, neighbor, when you need a hand, 'cause we all need somebody to lean on. I just might have a problem that you'll understand. We all need somebody to lean on. If there is a load that you have to bear and you can't carry, I'm right up the road and I'll share your load. If you just call me, yeah, yeah, call me, oh yeah, call me. We love you, GracePointe.